Sabrina Wells's morning unraveled before she even got to work. The day had started like any other. She'd go for a walk in the park and then decided to go to the ATM before returning home to get ready for work. She was ready for the pitiful balance, although she didn't seem to remember when she accessed her account the last. Instead, the screen glowed account frozen. Her heart skipped. That had to be a mistake. She refreshed the page. Then again. The message remained, unchanging, mocking. A spike of unease crawled up her spine as she quickly checked her credit cards. Declined. Her savings? Locked. Every single account she had access to was shut down. She tapped the customer service number, her foot jiggling anxiously as she listened to the automated prompts. After punching through an exhausting menu, a woman finally picked up, her voice syrupy sweet in a way that instantly put Sabrina on edge. "I'm sorry, Ms. Wells, but this account does not belong to you." Sabrina almost dropped the phone. "What? No. That's not possible. I've had this account for years. I'm afraid I can't provide further information. You'll need to visit a branch with valid identification." "Fine." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "I'll be there as soon as I can." She hung up, her pulse hammering. Her rent was due in a few days. She had groceries to buy. There was no way this was happening right now. Trying to push down her rising panic, she hurried to get home and get ready for work. She'd figure this out later. Right now, she had work to get to. Sabrina sprinted out the door, her breath clouding in the cool morning air as she rushed down the street. Maybe this was just a bank glitch. Maybe everything was fine. Maybe. She stopped short in front of her apartment building. The lock had been changed. She jiggled the handle, but it didn't budge. Her stomach churned. This wasn't happening. She turned and spotted her landlord, Mr. Price, watering the half-dead plant outside his office. Relief hit her like a wave. "Hey. There's some mistake. My key isn't working." He barely glanced up. "You don't live here anymore." Sabrina blinked. "What? You moved out last week." A cold prickle crept up her neck. "I did not move out. My stuff is inside. My name is on the lease." Mr. Price sighed heavily, setting down his watering can. "Look, lady, I don't know what scam you're trying to pull, but I don't rent to strangers. Now, please leave before I call the cops." Sabrina took a step back. Her skin felt too tight, her head buzzing. Her life was disappearing. Fighting the tremble in her hands, she dug into her bag, pulling out her ID. "Look. This is me. I live here." He took it with a frown, eyes skimming the plastic card. Then his lips curled into a smirk. "Nice try." He tossed it back. Sabrina caught it midair, glaring. "What's your problem?" "My problem? This ID says Aaron Reed." The words slammed into her like a physical blow. Her stomach twisted as she stared at the card in her hands. The face was hers. The date of birth was hers. But the name wasn't. Her breaths turned shallow. Without another word, she spun on her heel and bolted. By the time she reached her office building, her fingers were ice, her lungs burning. This was all some horrible mistake. Maybe the bank had messed up. Maybe Price had mixed up tenants. She just needed to get to her desk. She just needed one thing to be normal. Sabrina rushed into the glass lobby, heading straight for security. The usual guard, Reggie, barely glanced up before shaking his head. "Can I help you?" "I'm running late," she huffed, flashing her work badge. He frowned. "This isn't valid." "What?" He sighed, leaning toward his monitor. There's no record of an Sabrina Wells in the system. That's not possible, she snapped. I've worked here for a year. If that were true, you'd be in the system. Her throat tightened. Reggie, come on. You know me. He gave her a blank look. Sorry, lady. Never seen you before. Her stomach clenched. Movement in the corner of her eye. A familiar blonde stepped out of the elevator. Relief surged through her. Brielle. The junior paralegal turned, her expression neutral. Sabrina let out a nervous laugh. Tell them I work here. Brielle's brows pulled together. I'm sorry, do I know you? Sabrina's breath stalled. Are you joking? Brielle's gaze darted to security, then back to her. I think you have me confused with someone else. No. No, this wasn't happening. The ground felt unsteady beneath her as security took a step closer. Ma'am, I need you to leave. Sabrina didn't move. She felt like she was floating, like none of this was real. Ma'am. The voice was firmer this time. Her knees locked. Then, somehow, she forced herself to walk out. She stumbled onto the sidewalk, the city swirling around her. Her phone. She'd call HR. She'd call the police. She'd call someone. She yanked it from her bag, but before she could dial, another notification popped up. Service suspended. The street spun. A honk made her flinch. A sleek black car had pulled up against the curb. The windows were tinted, the exterior pristine. The back door swung open. Two men in dark suits stepped out. Sabrina Wells? Her pulse pounded. Who's asking? One of them pulled out a card, its gold lettering catching the sunlight. Mr. Ward requests your presence. Ward. The name sent a spike of fear through her. If you come with us, you'll get answers. And if I don't? The man's expression remained neutral. That's not really an option. Her hands curled into fists. She could run. She could scream. But what good would it do? She had no money. No phone. No identity. Her life was already gone. With a shaky breath, she stepped into the car. The ride was silent. The men didn't speak. Sabrina kept her gaze fixed on the blurred city beyond the glass, her heartbeat hammering. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath a towering skyscraper. The moment she stepped out, she knew. This was his place. Luca Ward. Billionaire. Ruthless. Untouchable. And, apparently, the man who had just erased her life. A private elevator carried her to the top floor. The doors slid open, revealing a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of cold, effortless luxury that made her skin crawl. And there he was. Luca turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. Hello, Sabrina, he said smoothly. Her throat was too tight to speak. You seem confused. He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. Understandable. What the hell is going on? He almost smirked. You agreed to this, he said, his voice maddeningly calm. Her breath came short. Agreed to what? You just don't remember. A chill ran through her. And then, softly, he added, but you will. Sabrina's fingers dug into the cold marble desk, her grip the only thing grounding her in a reality that felt like it was slipping through her fingers. Across from her, Luca Ward sat with all the patience in the world, watching her unravel as she scanned the document he had just placed in front of her. She didn't need to read past the first few lines to know something was terribly wrong. In exchange for complete debt forgiveness and immunity from legal consequences, Sabrina Wells willingly forfeits her assets, identity, and past life. Her name was there in black ink, at the bottom of the last page. Her signature. And beside it, as if to mock her further, her fingerprints were pressed neatly in dark ink. The sight of them sent a jolt of nausea through her. "This is fake," she said, though the words felt weak the moment they left her mouth. Luca leaned back, the barest hint of amusement curling at the edge of his lips. "You think I forged your signature?" "I know you did," she said quickly, her voice sharper than she intended. He let out a quiet exhale, a sound so infuriatingly calm it made her want to throw something at him. "How did I get your fingerprints, then?" Sabrina's mouth opened, but nothing came out. That cold panic that had been sitting in her chest cracked open into something worse, something that whispered a horrible possibility. She had signed this. Somewhere, at some point, she had picked up a pen, pressed her thumb onto an ink pad, and agreed to erase herself. That couldn't be right. Except, the proof was right there. I didn't sign this," she managed, even though her voice wasn't as certain as before. "You did," Luca said smoothly. She shook her head, harder this time. "I wouldn't." "You did." There was no emotion behind his words, no sign of anger or frustration. He wasn't trying to convince her of anything. To him, this was just a fact. Sabrina could hear her pulse in her ears, a dull roar drowning out everything else. She didn't remember. Not the contract. Not the moment she had apparently handed her entire life over to him. And especially not why. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her pants, pressing deep enough into her skin to leave marks. She needed air. She needed answers. "What legal consequences?" she asked, her voice strained. Luca didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tapped his fingers against the armrest of his chair, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, "I think you already know." She hated the way her stomach clenched. "You think I remember something," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. His silence was answer enough. "Well, I don't," she snapped, shoving the contract back at him. "So why don't you stop playing these games and just tell me what the hell is going on?" Luca exhaled through his nose, slow and measured. Then he stood, walking to the bar against the far wall. The soft clink of glass and the quiet splash of liquid were the only sounds in the massive penthouse. He took a slow sip before turning back to her. "I'm giving you time." Sabrina let out a short, humorless laugh. "Time for what?" "For it to come back." Something about the way he said it, so certain, so patient, made her feel like she was dangling over the edge of something dangerous. "You don't just forget something like this," she said, her voice quieter now. "You don't just sign away your entire life either," he countered, and this time, his voice wasn't calm anymore. There was something else buried beneath it. Something sharp. Sabrina's hands clenched into fists. She didn't like this. Any of it. She didn't like the way the room felt too big, too cold, too controlled. She didn't like the way he kept watching her, as if waiting for something. Most of all, she didn't like the way a part of her, a very small, very dangerous part, was starting to believe him. What kind of person signed a contract like this? What kind of person needed to? Sabrina pressed her fingers against her temple, as if that would force the memories back, but there was nothing. Not even a whisper. Luca set his glass down with a quiet click. "Let's make something clear," he said, voice controlled. "I don't have to tell you anything." Sabrina's breath hitched. He took a slow step toward her, measured and careful, like she was something fragile but unpredictable. "You want answers," he said. "Then start remembering." She stumbled back instinctively, hating the way her body reacted on instinct, like it somehow knew something she didn't. Like it knew him. Luca tilted his head, studying her. And then, after a long pause, he smirked. "You will." Sabrina waited until the apartment was silent. It had taken her less than an hour to realize that she wasn't allowed to leave. The penthouse was beautiful, a sprawling space with sleek furniture and walls of glass overlooking the city, but it was also a cage. Every exit led to locked doors, controlled security panels, and men in suits stationed at key points. Her first attempt had been subtle, an innocent stretch down the hall, glancing around as if admiring the decor, only to find the elevator completely disabled. The stairwell door was locked. Even the balcony, which stretched out from the main living area, had reinforced glass walls. Luca had been watching her the whole time. He didn't stop her. He didn't have to. She had no money, no phone, and no identity. And now, apparently, no past. By evening, she had managed to fake cooperation. She ate dinner at the impossibly long dining table, ignored Luca as much as possible, and spent the next few hours pretending to read in the guest room. Then, when the penthouse was finally still, she made her move. She stripped the sheets from the bed, tying them together as tightly as she could. It was ridiculous. It was insane. But at this point, so was everything else. She tugged the knot once, twice, testing its strength. It would hold. The balcony was her only way out. The reinforced glass didn't extend to the guest bedroom, and from here, she had a direct drop to the level below, a massive terrace she had spotted earlier that belonged to one of the lower floors. It wasn't a great plan. It wasn't even a good plan. But it was a plan. She secured the knotted sheets to the heavy nightstand, dragged it closer to the window, and forced herself not to hesitate. If she thought about it too long, she would lose her nerve. Sabrina climbed over the ledge, breath shaking as she wrapped her fingers around the fabric. And then she let herself drop. She barely had time to register the rush of air before the rope jerked violently, swinging her toward the glass wall. Her feet slammed against it, hard enough to rattle her teeth. She bit back a curse, adjusting her grip. Almost there. One more swing. One more reach. A shadow moved on the terrace below. Her stomach plunged. The door slid open, and a man in a dark suit stepped out. Going somewhere? Sabrina's fingers slipped. The fabric burned against her palms as she barely managed to keep from falling. This wasn't happening. The guard sighed, reaching up effortlessly, grabbing the sheet in his fist like it was nothing. She was still dangling midair when he yanked. Her fingers gave out. She dropped, only a few feet, but it was enough. She hit the ground with a sharp gasp, rolling just in time to avoid smashing her skull against the stone. The guard stepped forward, unimpressed. "Ms. Wells, we can do this the easy way or the hard way." She didn't think. She ran. She barely made it 2 steps before a second guard emerged from the terrace doorway, blocking her path. Her heart pounded. There was nowhere to go. She could fight, maybe, if she wanted to die. Before she could decide, the first guard's radio crackled. "Bring her back." The voice was calm, unbothered. "Luca." Sabrina glared as the guards closed in, each grabbing an arm. "This is kidnapping," she snapped, twisting against their grip. "No," one of them said. "This is you getting caught." They dragged her through the terrace doors, back into the lower apartment, then through a private elevator that only required a thumbprint to access. Luca Ward had built this entire place like a damn fortress. The elevator hummed as it ascended, smooth and eerily quiet. She pressed her back against the wall, furious, breathless, and humiliated. Luca was waiting when the doors slid open. His tie was gone, the top buttons of his shirt undone, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. For the first time since she woke up in this nightmare, he looked the tiniest bit ruffled. "You really thought that would work?" he asked. Sabrina jerked out of the guard's grip, stepping onto the marble floor. "I had to try. Luca nodded at the guards, dismissing them. The elevator doors closed, leaving just the two of them. Sabrina hated the way her skin felt tight under his gaze. He studied her for a long moment before sighing. "Sit down." She didn't move. His jaw twitched. "Fine." He walked to the bar, pouring himself a drink. "Since you're so eager to leave, let's fill in some gaps, shall we?" Sabrina crossed her arms, still breathing too hard from the chase. "You weren't just some random woman," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You were my fiancé." The word sent a sharp chill through her. She stared at him. A laugh bubbled up in her throat, sharp and humorless. "What? You heard me. You're lying." He took a slow sip, unbothered. "I'm not." Something inside her tilted. She would remember that. She would remember being engaged to one of the wealthiest men in the world. Wouldn't she? Sabrina forced herself to breathe. "If that's true, then why the hell am I not wearing a ring?" "Because," Lucas said, setting his glass down, "you weren't in love with me." Her stomach twisted. "You were scamming me," he said, voice flat. The room stilled. "You were planning to drain my accounts and disappear before the wedding," Luca continued. "You almost got away with it." Sabrina's pulse slammed against her ribs. It wasn't true. It couldn't be. But her mind, her stupid, blank, empty mind, offered nothing. She swallowed. "You're making that up. I caught you the night before you were supposed to run." Her skin flushed cold. Luca's gaze locked onto hers, unreadable. "I had two choices. Turn you in or give you another way out." Sabrina's fingers curled into fists. "What did I choose?" "You signed the contract." "The contract." "The one that said she had willingly erased her life." "Why would I sign it?" she demanded. Luca's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Because I gave you a better deal," he said. "Your identity in exchange for your freedom, asterisk asterisk." Her stomach turned. "Erase your identity," he said, repeating the exact words from the contract. "Leave this life. In exchange, I won't destroy you." Her breath came short. She pressed a hand to her temple, trying to will something to come back. It didn't. Nothing did. "You're lying," she whispered, but there was no conviction behind it. Luca tilted his head. "You tell me." Sabrina hadn't been planning on sticking around. She might not have remembered much, but she knew herself well enough to know one thing: she wouldn't have signed that contract unless she had a plan. Luca thought he had one. That by wiping her past clean, he had taken away her options. But she had always found a way out. It was what she did. And so, after days of pretending to cooperate, waiting, watching, listening for when his guards changed shifts, when the penthouse went quiet, when he was least expecting it, she made her move. It was easier than she thought it would be. Which should have been her first warning. The garage was enormous, lined with sleek, gleaming cars, the kind of machines built to go from zero to reckless in seconds. Luca had left his security system intact, of course, but she had spent enough time around men like him to know that their weakness wasn't their technology. It was their arrogance. Men like Luca thought power was enough. That the walls they built around themselves were impenetrable. That their money, their control, their influence made them untouchable. But Sabrina had made a career out of slipping through cracks, and even if she couldn't remember how she had gotten here, she sure as hell wasn't going to stay. She found the key fobs easily enough, lined up neatly in a locked case, as if he was daring her to take them. She grabbed one at random, the kind of car that cost more than most houses, and didn't waste time admiring it. She had to go. She slid behind the wheel, the leather cool against her palms as she hit the ignition. The car purred to life, and a small thrill shot through her as she shifted into drive. Luca was going to lose his mind when he realized. She punched the gas and didn't look back. The city blurred past her as she sped onto the highway. No destination. No plan. Just away. She didn't know how long she drove, didn't register the exit signs or the headlights streaking past. Her heart pounded, fingers clenched tight around the wheel. She had done it. She had. A shadow in her peripheral vision. A black SUV. Her pulse skipped. She risked a glance in the mirror. Another one. 2, maybe 3 cars, closing in from behind. Her breath caught. Not Luca's security. She didn't know how she knew that. She just knew. Her hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles aching. It wasn't just him she had been running from. Sabrina's mind raced. There was no way to be sure, no clear memory she could grasp onto, just a deep, gnawing certainty that something was wrong. She took the next exit too fast, tires screeching, the engine growling as she pushed the car harder. The SUVs followed. They weren't trying to stop her. They were trying to kill her. Panic kicked in. She turned sharply, cutting through an intersection, nearly clipping a pedestrian. People were staring. She had to get off the street. She veered onto a smaller road, then another. The headlights behind her grew brighter. They weren't backing off. Sabrina's chest tightened. She hit the gas again, the engine screaming under the pressure. And then she saw it. The truck. Too fast. Too close. There was no time. The impact came in a violent, deafening crash. The world flipped. Glass shattered. And then. Nothing. The next time Sabrina opened her eyes, she was somewhere else. The light was dim, filtered through heavy curtains. She was lying down, the weight of blankets pressing against her legs. Her body ached. A deep, throbbing pain in her ribs, her shoulder. Her head was foggy, her thoughts slow and sticky, like her mind had been pulled through tar. Something wasn't right. She tried to move, but a sharp pain shot through her side. A soft rustle. Then. "You're awake." The voice was smooth, cool, too familiar. Sabrina's stomach dropped. Luca. She forced herself to turn her head. He was sitting at the edge of the room, perfectly put together in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up just enough to show the hint of veins running down his forearms. He looked unbothered, the way only a man who had already won could look. She swallowed hard. Where? Her throat was raw, her voice barely there. "Back where you belong," Luca said. A slow, creeping terror curled around her ribs. She blinked, her body still sluggish, her thoughts trying to connect pieces that didn't fit. The accident. The SUVs. The crash. And now, this. Her heart pounded. How long? A few days. Sabrina stared at him, trying to read between the lines of what he wasn't saying. He had brought her back. Not to a hospital. Here. "You had a concussion," he continued, his voice infuriatingly calm. "Cracked ribs. Nothing too serious. Nothing too serious." Like she was an inconvenience. Like she was a problem that needed managing. Her fingers curled into the blanket. "You knew," she said, throat tight. Luca didn't ask what she meant. "You knew they were coming for me." A beat of silence. Then, finally. "Yes." A sharp, burning feeling bloomed in her chest. "You didn't tell me," she whispered. Luca exhaled, standing slowly. He moved toward her, stopping just at the edge of the bed. "You wouldn't have believed me." Sabrina's jaw clenched. He wasn't wrong. But that didn't make it better. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar object, setting it on the nightstand. Her contract. The same pages, the same ink-stained fingerprints, the same horrible deal she still didn't remember making. "This is what happens when you break our agreement," he said. Her eyes flicked to the papers, then back to him. "You're saying this is my fault?" "I'm saying," Luca murmured, "that I gave you an out. You didn't take it." Her chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths. Everything hurt. Everything was wrong. But one thing was clear. She wasn't just running from Luca. And now, she was back where she started. Sabrina sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, her fingers curled into the soft fabric of the blanket. The dull ache in her ribs pulsed in time with her heartbeat, a constant reminder that she was alive, that she had survived, that somehow, she was back here. Luca's house. His prison. She hadn't spoken since waking up, not beyond clipped words, not beyond what was necessary. She refused to give him the satisfaction of acknowledging him, refused to let him think for even a second that she was grateful to be breathing, to be recovering in one of his rooms, in a place he controlled. He had let her rest. But not for long. When the bedroom door finally opened, she knew it wasn't a doctor, or a nurse, or someone who might offer her an actual explanation. It was him. Luca stepped inside without hesitation, moving like he had every right to be there. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, a watch gleaming on his wrist. He looked comfortable, like none of this was strange, like he wasn't keeping a woman in his house who had literally tried to steal his car and run from him twice. He poured himself a drink from the cart near the window, slow and unhurried. He hadn't looked at her yet, hadn't acknowledged her glare, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands had curled into fists in her lap. It was a game. She wouldn't play. She turned her gaze to the nightstand, where the contract still sat, right where he had left it. "I had a life before this," she muttered. "Before whatever this is." Luca took a sip of his drink, finally meeting her eyes. "You did." She bristled. "And then you signed it away," he added. Her fingers dug deeper into the blanket. He set his glass down with a quiet click. "Do you want to know how long you've been gone?" The room suddenly felt too small. Her throat tightened. "Gone?" Luca leaned against the edge of the dresser, arms crossed. His expression was impossible to read. "It's been a year, Sabrina." The words landed like a punch. Her body went still, breath catching, a sharp tremor running through her limbs. A year. No. No, that wasn't possible. She swallowed, shaking her head. "That's not. You left. You disappeared," Luca said, his voice even, like he was explaining something as simple as the weather. She shook her head harder, gripping the blanket as if it might hold her together. "You're lying." Luca exhaled through his nose, stepping closer. "You're remembering pieces, aren't you?" A flash. A dance floor, twinkling lights above. A sharp suit, his hand on the small of her back. A diamond ring, too big, too bright, too much. Her stomach turned. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her fingers into her temples. The flashes came faster now, glamorous parties, crystal glasses, the weight of a velvet box in her hands. A private jet. A villa overlooking the ocean. A credit card she used without thinking twice. Her fingers brushing against silk dresses, against luxury, against a world she had never belonged in. Her heart pounded. Because then came the other memories. Her hands, moving quickly over documents, scanning numbers on a screen. Passwords. Codes. The feeling of a rush she had always chased, the thrill of outsmarting, of outplaying. Her pulse spiked. She saw herself smiling at him over candlelit dinners, whispering in his ear at fundraisers, slipping into his office when she knew he wouldn't be around. She saw herself stealing from him. A sharp breath left her lips, ragged and unsteady. Luca was watching her carefully, his expression calm, but his jaw was tight, his fingers pressing into his forearm. "You're remembering the wrong part," he muttered. Sabrina's stomach churned. She shook her head, pushing herself off the bed, but her legs barely held her, her ribs screaming in protest. The wrong part? Her hands curled into fists. "Why did I leave?" she demanded. His gaze darkened. "You tell me." Her breath came faster. She could see it all so clearly now, the engagement, the parties, the wealth. The life of luxury she had slipped into so easily. But it didn't explain anything. It didn't explain why she had disappeared. Why she had agreed to erase herself. She hadn't. She couldn't have. Could she? Luca studied her, waiting. She exhaled shakily, meeting his gaze. "You're not telling me everything." His fingers tapped once against his bicep, slow, deliberate. "Neither are you." Her nails dug into her palms. She wasn't playing this game with him. She turned toward the door, ignoring the way her ribs protested, ignoring the fact that she had nowhere to go. Luca didn't stop her. He didn't need to. Because no matter how far she got, no matter how many steps she took, she still had no idea who she had been. And worse, she had no idea who she was now. Sabrina sat stiffly in the chair by the window, arms wrapped around herself as if that might somehow hold her together. The city lights stretched out in front of her, endless and indifferent, their glow reflecting against the glass. She could hear the quiet hum of traffic below, the muffled sounds of life continuing as if nothing had changed. As if she weren't sitting in a penthouse belonging to a man who had erased her past, who had pulled her back into a life she didn't remember, waiting for her to fill in the blanks. Behind her, the sound of glass clinking punctuated the silence. Luca was at the bar, pouring himself a drink with the same casual efficiency that he did everything else. He hadn't said anything since she had stormed out of the bedroom, since she had pieced together just enough to leave her dizzy with questions. The problem was, none of it made sense. She remembered the money, the engagement, the stealing. But nothing about why she had left. Nothing about why he had let her go. That was the missing piece. If she had stolen from him, betrayed him, why hadn't he turned her in? Why had he given her an out instead of making her pay for what she'd done? Sabrina's fingers clenched around the armrest, her jaw tight. "Say something." Luca exhaled, slow and measured. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth would be nice." He let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You think you're ready for that?" Her stomach twisted. "I think I deserve it." A beat of silence. Then, maybe. She turned to face him, and for the first time, he looked different. Not cold, not distant. Just tired. His tie was loosened, his sleeve still rolled up, and his eyes, usually so calculating, held something else. Something she didn't know how to name. "Why did you let me go?" she asked. His jaw tensed. She pressed forward. "If I stole from you, if I was such a risk, why not have me arrested? You don't seem like the kind of man who forgives easily." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just watched her long enough that she felt seen in a way that made her skin prickle. Then, finally, he set his glass down and spoke. "I didn't make the deal just to get rid of you." Her fingers twitched. The air shifted, something heavy settling between them. "You keep saying that," he murmured. "Like you think it's a lie." Sabrina held his gaze. "Isn't it?" He exhaled, rubbing a hand along his jaw, something unreadable flashing across his face before it disappeared. No. Her pulse hitched. He was telling the truth. She didn't know how she knew it, but she did. The next words came out quieter, like they weighed something. I made the deal because I was in love with you. Everything stopped. Sabrina blinked, a cold chill crawling over her skin, tightening around her ribs. It didn't make sense. It didn't fit with the man in front of her. You're lying, she whispered. Luca tilted his head slightly, a faint smirk pulling at his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. You keep saying that. Her heart pounded. She tried to remember. Tried to reach for anything that might tell her whether or not he was telling the truth. Because if he was. If he had actually been in love with her. Then why had she left? Her fingers curled into fists. You're saying I scammed you, she said slowly. And you just, what? Decided to let me erase myself because you loved me? Not exactly. A sharp laugh escaped her, more disbelief than amusement. Then explain it to me. Luca's gaze darkened. I thought if I gave you a choice, you'd come back. Sabrina's chest tightened. She stared at him, unblinking. That's insane. Is it? Her throat closed up. Because the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that she didn't know if it was. She didn't know if there had ever been a version of herself that had loved him back. And she had nothing, to tell her otherwise. Her hands trembled. But then the accident happened, Luca continued, his voice quieter now. The air changed again, the sharp edges softening just slightly. And suddenly, it hit her. That was what had ruined everything. Not the theft. Not the betrayal. The accident. You didn't expect me to survive, she murmured. Luca exhaled through his nose, looking away briefly. No. The words sat between them, unspoken things threading through the silence. Sabrina's stomach turned. Everything made less sense now, not more. You wanted me to come back, she said. But instead, I woke up in a hospital with no memory of you. His jaw tightened. The pieces clicked, one by one, in a way that made her head ache. You weren't going to look for me, she realized, voice barely above a whisper. Luca's fingers tapped once against his glass. You were supposed to stay gone. The air went still. Sabrina didn't know what to feel. She couldn't even begin to untangle the mess of emotions curling in her chest. Luca had loved her. And yet, when the universe had erased her from itself, he had let it happen. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to call him a liar again, to tell him he was twisting the truth, that he had never wanted her back. But something deep inside her told her it wasn't true. Because even now, after everything, he hadn't let her go. And she had no idea what to do with that. Sabrina gripped the bathroom sink, her breath coming too fast, too shallow. The reflection staring back at her was someone she barely recognized, pale, hollow-eyed, a ghost of a person who had been unraveled piece by piece. Her fingers trembled as she pressed them against the cool marble, as if holding on to something solid might steady her. But nothing felt solid anymore. Because nothing made sense. The memories wouldn't stop. They kept surfacing, chaotic and contradictory, like someone had taken two different lives and forced them together. Some were warm, gilded in gold, Luca's hand on hers, laughter drifting between them, his voice low and teasing as he whispered promises she had once believed. But then, a flash of something colder. The weight of his grip on her wrist, not bruising, not painful, just firm. A voice that was softer but too measured, a man who didn't yell but whose control never wavered. Then another memory, sharp and too clear, her own hands moving quickly over documents, scanning numbers on a screen, the thrill of getting away with something that should have been impossible. She had been stealing from him. The realization had hit her before, but now she could feel it. The adrenaline, the careful calculation, the quiet, creeping knowledge that she had been playing a game she knew she couldn't afford to lose. But that wasn't what made her chest tighten. What made her fingers curl against the sink was the realization that she hadn't just been stealing, she had been planning something. She could feel it in the way her mind filled in the gaps, in the way her body tensed with the phantom memory of needing to run. She had been leaving him. Had she ever loved him at all? Or had he just thought she did? A sharp knock on the door made her jump. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing the heel of her hand against her forehead. Sabrina, Luca's voice came through the wood, steady, unreadable. Dinner. She didn't answer. He waited. He always waited. Sabrina exhaled, turning the faucet off with a slow, deliberate twist. She wasn't going to cower in here. She wasn't going to sit in the dark and let him dictate how this would play out. She opened the door. Luca stood just outside, watching her carefully, like he was studying a puzzle that still had too many missing pieces. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, the top buttons undone, like he had been thinking. She hated that. She brushed past him, walking toward the dining room without a word. The space was absurdly elegant, just like everything in his world: candlelight flickering off silver, wine glasses filled just enough, dishes plated as if they had been arranged for a magazine. She wanted to destroy it all. Luca took his usual seat at the head of the table, reaching for his glass, watching her as she lowered herself into the chair across from him. The sound of her fork scraping against the plate was the only noise between them. She barely tasted the food. She barely felt real. The silence stretched until it was unbearable. "I want to leave." Her voice was quiet but firm. Luca's hand stilled mid-motion, his glass hovering just before his lips. Slowly, he set it down. "No." Her stomach twisted, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "You can't keep me here. You don't belong anywhere else." The words landed between them like a quiet warning. "You don't exist, Sabrina." His voice was smooth, matter-of-fact, spoken like an undeniable truth. "Your name. Your bank accounts. Your records. Everything that made you who you were is gone." She shook her head, but it was a lie. "You signed it away," he continued. Her fingers curled into fists beneath the table. "You erased yourself. I just followed through." Sabrina felt the walls closing in, the weight of it settling onto her chest. "You think you're free?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. "Go ahead. Walk out the door. See how far you get." She wanted to call his bluff. She wanted to stand up, march to the front door, and prove him wrong. But she knew. She knew that if she left, there would be nothing waiting for her. No identity. No home. No past. "You don't love me," she whispered. Luca exhaled slowly, studying her like she was something fragile. "I never said I did." Her stomach dropped. Because he wasn't lying. And that meant something far worse than if he had. A sharp pain shot through Sabrina's skull, so sudden and blinding that she gasped, stumbling forward. She clutched the nightstand, fingers digging into the wood, her breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The pressure behind her eyes built, spreading through her temples, something breaking open inside her mind. And then the memory hit her like a wrecking ball. She wasn't just a scammer. She had been a recruit. Years ago, how many? 5? 6, she had been another nameless girl in a sea of them, running petty cons, barely scraping by, slipping through cracks. She had been good, too good, but she had been aimless. Until they found her. A man with dark eyes and an even darker suit had approached her outside a coffee shop in Chicago. She hadn't known his name then, no one ever said names, but she had known immediately that he wasn't someone you ignored. You could be making a lot more money, he had said, sipping his espresso like they were discussing the weather. You just need the right people behind you. She should have run then. She should have seen it for what it was. But she had smiled instead. She had let herself be pulled in. At first, it had been simple. Small jobs, nothing violent. Steal a package here, forge a signature there. She had been tested, trained, molded into exactly what they needed, someone who could become whoever they wanted her to be. Sabrina wasn't her real name. It wasn't even the first name they had given her. She had been Isabel, then Maya, then Lena, shifting like water, slipping into the roles they designed. They had taught her how to vanish, how to make people trust her, how to slip into places she had no business being. And then Luca Ward. He had been a target, nothing more. Another mark, another assignment. He had never been meant to be real. The organization had wanted something from him: information, leverage, access. She hadn't known the details, hadn't needed to. Her job had been to get close, to make him believe she was his. And she had done it. She had become his fiancée. She had worn his ring, smiled at his associates, learned every single one of his secrets. And when the time came, when they had told her to finish the job, to take what they needed and disappear, she had made the mistake of hesitating. She had waited too long. And they had turned on her. The night of her accident, she hadn't been running from Luca. She had been running from them. A sharp, white-hot pain exploded behind Sabrina's eyes, like a dam breaking inside her skull. She gasped, stumbling forward, grasping at the edges of the nightstand as the pressure in her head swelled and cracked open. Her vision blurred, the room tilting around her, her breath coming in ragged, uneven bursts. And then the memory slammed into her. She was behind the wheel. Her knuckles were white against the leather steering wheel, her fingers trembling but steady as she gripped it tighter, pushing the car faster, harder. The city lights stretched in her rearview mirror, growing smaller, fading as she tore down the open highway, the speedometer creeping dangerously high. The engine growled, the tires hissed against the pavement. But no matter how fast she went, they were still behind her. Two black SUVs. Their headlights glowed menacingly, creeping closer. Her heart pounded, her pulse a steady roar in her ears. She had been so careful. She had done everything right. She had disappeared, wiped herself from every system, built a new life under a new name. A clean slate. And still, they had found her. She felt the weight of it now, the gravity of what she had done. The reason she had been running. It had never just been about Luca. She had taken something from them. Something they would kill for. The voice from that phone call echoed in her head, the one she hadn't recognized at the time, the one that had stopped her cold when she answered. "You didn't think we forgot about you, did you?" Sabrina's hands shook on the wheel. She had spent the last year believing she was just another con artist, that she had made a selfish deal to save herself. But she wasn't just a scammer. She had been working for them. She had been their asset, their tool, trained and conditioned to slip into lives that weren't hers. And then she had betrayed them. The gaps in her memory stitched themselves together in an instant. She had infiltrated Luca's life for a reason. She had stolen something big enough to make them hunt her down, something that had made her more valuable dead than alive. And now they had found her. The SUV on her left swerved toward her. Sabrina's heart leapt to her throat. She jerked the wheel, barely avoiding the collision, her tires screeching as she veered into the next lane. They weren't trying to scare her. They were trying to eliminate her. She took the next turn too fast. Her tires skidded, her body slamming hard into the door, but she forced the car back under control, taking sharp, gulping breaths. She needed a way out. Think. There was no way out. Her phone. She fumbled for it, her fingers slick against the screen. No service. They must have jammed it. She glanced at the mirror. The first SUV sped up, closing the distance. Sabrina's breath caught. The second SUV accelerated, pushing in from the other side. They were going to box her in. Her foot slammed against the gas pedal. She needed to get off this road. Her mind raced, side streets, an overpass, anything. But the SUVs weren't just following. They were hurting her. Panic crawled up her spine, curling around her lungs like a vice. Her body moved on instinct. She swerved left. The SUV beside her matched her. She swerved right. The other one blocked her. Her throat went dry. No. This wasn't random. They were controlling where she went. And then she saw it. The truck. A massive, 18-wheeler, pulling onto the road up ahead, its headlights blinding in the dark. The SUVs sped up. She understood what was about to happen a second too late. The first impact sent her car into a violent spin. Her seatbelt locked, her body whipping sideways as metal screamed against metal. The truck was too close. A flash of headlights. The deafening crunch of impact. The world flipped. Her vision shattered, everything spinning, glass bursting, metal twisting. And then darkness. Sabrina stood motionless in the center of Luca's office, her breath coming in uneven bursts. The final pieces of her memory had snapped into place, and the truth settled like a heavy stone in her chest. This whole time, she had thought Luca had kept her here out of some twisted attachment. That maybe, despite his cold, unshakable demeanor, there had been something emotional tying him to her, anger, revenge, love, something. But now she knew. She was never here because he wanted her back. She was here because she was collateral. Luca leaned against the edge of his desk, his expression carefully unreadable, watching her process it all. "You knew," she said, her voice sharper than she expected. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Yes." Her stomach twisted. "Since when?" His gaze didn't waver. "The night I caught you." Sabrina's fingers curled into fists. "Before the accident. Before she lost everything. You knew I wasn't just a con artist," she said slowly, piecing it together as she spoke. "You knew I was working for them." Luca didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. His silence was enough. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "And you let me think this was about us." "You made it about us," he corrected. "I always knew it was more than that." Sabrina's breath hitched, her body burning with anger, humiliation, something she couldn't name. She had stolen from Luca. Not just money. Not just secrets for her own survival. She had taken something so valuable that an entire organization had been after it. And Luca had kept her here because as long as he had her, they couldn't use what she had stolen against him. "They have the information, don't they?" she asked, her voice eerily steady. "Yes," Luca admitted. Her mind raced. "As long as you have me, they won't release it," she murmured, mostly to herself, connecting the dots. "If they try to use it against me," Luca said, "I expose them. They know that. That's why they haven't moved yet." Her hands shook. "So that's all I am to you," she whispered. "Leverage?" Luca exhaled, looking at her like he was tired of explaining things she should have figured out herself. "You were leverage before I ever caught you, Sabrina," he said, his voice unreadable. "Just for the other side." Her chest tightened. You kept me here because it was convenient, she spat. You were safer here than anywhere else, he said simply. Sabrina let out a sharp laugh, shaking with rage. Safer, she echoed. You don't get to use that word. I wasn't safe. I was trapped. Luca tilted his head slightly, studying her. You're still alive, he said. That's more than can be said for most people who cross them. Her stomach churned. She knew he was right. But it didn't change anything. Sabrina took a slow step toward the desk, closing the space between them, her voice lower now, more controlled. The accident, she murmured. Did that just make things more convenient for you? Luca hesitated. Yes and no. Explain, she demanded. You lost your memory, he said simply. That was a liability and an advantage. Sabrina gritted her teeth. An advantage how? You were easier to manipulate. Her breath caught. There it was. The truth, laid bare. She had been easy to control because she hadn't remembered who she was. And that had worked in his favor. Her hands clenched at her sides. You used me. Luca's expression didn't change. Yes. The sheer audacity of his honesty made her dizzy with fury. He didn't lie. He never needed to. She was sick of it. You kept me here, let me believe I had nowhere else to go, she said, her voice rising. And now that I remember, what? You just expect me to accept it? He didn't answer. Because they both knew the truth. He didn't need her to accept anything. Because he was still in control. She had nowhere to go. She was still trapped. Sabrina turned sharply, her breath heavy, her mind racing. You're angry, Luca observed. She whirled on him. You think? Luca sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Sabrina. No, she snapped. You don't get to act like this is normal. Like you're some benevolent captor who's been keeping me safe this whole time. You were safer here, he repeated. Sabrina let out a short, harsh laugh. Right, she muttered. Until I wasn't useful anymore. She turned toward the door, ready to walk out, ready to breathe fresh air that wasn't polluted by his presence. You're not leaving, Luca said behind her. Her jaw clenched. Watch me. You need to see something first. Sabrina hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she turned back. Luca reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a slim folder. He slid it toward her. Sabrina narrowed her eyes. You should look inside, he said. She snatched it off the desk, flipping it open. Her breath hitched. Photographs. Documents. Names. Surveillance photos of her. Not from before. Not from when she had worked for them. From now. Her blood ran cold. They never stopped watching you, Luca said. She flipped through the pages, heart pounding. Images of her in the city. Her at the bank. Her on the street, looking over her shoulder. You think they believed you just forgot? Luca asked, crossing his arms. They've been waiting for you to remember. And now that you have. Her throat went dry. They're going to come for you. Sabrina's hands shook as she gripped the papers. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Luca leaned forward, his voice calm, controlled. Because you don't have any options left. She swallowed hard, bile rising in her throat. You want something, she said. I do, Luca admitted. Sabrina forced herself to meet his gaze. You help me steal back what you took, he said. We take it from them before they can use it. You get your freedom. I get my empire back. Her stomach turned. You're asking me to work with you? She asked, incredulous. Luca smirked slightly. I wouldn't say I'm asking. Sabrina let out a slow, shaky breath. She hated this. She hated him. But most of all, she hated that he was right. Because she wasn't free. Not yet. And if she wanted to get out of this alive, she was going to have to make one last deal. Sabrina didn't have a choice. She had spent years slipping out of impossible situations, talking her way through locked doors, picking her way out of corners she'd backed herself into. But this? There was no smooth escape, no last-minute trick to pull. Luca had made sure of that. She sat across from him in his office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knee bouncing under the table. The plan had been laid out. The pieces were set. There was no turning back. You get me inside, she muttered, rubbing at her temple. I get us the documents. We get out. That's it. Luca nodded, watching her with the same maddening calm he always had. That's it. Sabrina exhaled sharply, shaking her head. It's never that simple. He smirked, lifting his glass to take a sip of whiskey. No, he admitted. But that's what makes it fun. She shot him a glare, but the truth was, there wasn't enough time to fight. They were doing this. The building was exactly the way she remembered it, cold, secure, built like a fortress. The people inside weren't just criminals. They were the kind of people who could erase a person's existence with a phone call. She adjusted the earpiece Luca had given her, keeping her head down as she slipped through the back entrance. Security, she whispered. 3 on the first floor, Luca responded through the earpiece. 2 on the second. The office you need is down the hall, last door on the right. She moved quickly, heart pounding, slipping through shadows. Her hands weren't shaking. That should have worried her. The office door was locked, of course it was, but locks had never stopped her before. She pulled a small tool from her pocket, working quickly. The door clicked open. She stepped inside. The safe was in the corner, just like she remembered. Her fingers moved on instinct, muscle memory kicking in, and within seconds, the lock turned. She opened the safe, heart hammering. And there it was. Everything. Flash drives, files, every single thing she had stolen from Luca, the things that had put a target on her back, the things that had almost gotten her killed. The things that, if they fell into the wrong hands, would end everything. Sabrina, Luca's voice crackled in her ear. You got it? She hesitated for half a second. Then she grabbed the files and stuffed them into her jacket. Got it, she whispered. Footsteps. Her stomach dropped. Move, Luca ordered. Now. Sabrina sprinted out of the room, dodging down the hall, barely slipping around the corner before she was spotted. The extraction point was through the kitchen, past the back exit. She could hear voices behind her, people realizing something was wrong. She ran faster. The door swung open ahead. A black car idled by the curb. Luca was in the driver's seat. She jumped in. Tires screeched. And just like that, they were gone. The next morning, Luca placed a thick envelope on the table in front of her. Her new identity. A bank account in a different country. Enough money to disappear, again. She stared at it for a long time. Then she reached for it. You're free, Luca said. She nodded, tucking the envelope into her bag. She was free. But as she stepped outside, breathing in the cool air, she realized something. She didn't want to run anymore. And she hoped, desperately, painfully, that this would be the last time she had to become someone else.